Hi and thank you for clicking on this video. My name is Phil, aka Phil, and a few weeks ago I made my 1-year experience video about the Nikon Zf, where I basically shared my experience with the Nikon Zf, owning it for 1 year, and also kind of ranted on the lens choices for the Nikon Zf, aka missing lenses with aperture rings, especially the ones having autofocus natively from Nikon. And I was kind of surprised that this topic started a hot conversation and discussion within my comment section. And I wanted to take the opportunity to do a follow-up because a lot of comments made me think. And yeah, that's why I wanted to do a follow-up video on this. If I look at that comment section of that video, I have the feeling that there are kind of two camps regarding that topic of aperture rings for the Nikon Z mount, specifically vintage designed lenses. And I picked up a few comments which I want to share with you. The first camp, I would call it the Nikon camp. These are Nikon users who are already in the Nikon ecosystem and have the ZF as an additional camera body. And for me, the comment of Gletschertroll summarizes it quite well. I currently use two Nikon mirrorless bodies, the Z8 and the ZF. Both are wonderful cameras. They are sharing a burden as follows. If I want to be quick, precise, and want to avoid being held up by fumbling around with dials, etc., I'm using the Z8 and variety of native Nikon lenses. If I want to play around with depth of field, have no fear of missing crucial shots, of crucial moments, and simply want to enjoy photography, I'm using the ZF with some fantastic manual focal length lenses. Do I need native vintage type lenses for the Nikon ZF? No, I don't. For me, there's no application for it. If I want to go autofocus, I'm taking the Z8. If I want to indulge in a retro feeling, taking it slow and easy, I'm taking the ZF with a couple of focal lengths. I don't need more options than I already have. Do I understand your point? Absolutely. It is just that I don't need them. The other camp, I would kind of call it the Fuji/new customer camp, which I count myself in. Because the Nikon ZF is my first Nikon body. And during this year I had the feeling that a lot of Fuji users were kind of eyeing the Nikon ZF. And a few of my comments represent that. Like Dom Thomas wrote, I've heard quite a few Fuji owners say that they would switch to the Nikon ZF if they had native primes with aperture rings. I'm in the same camp. I'm on the fence to sell my X Pro 2 and Fuji lenses and go with the ZF. But I'm still not sure if I want to go with Sony E primes or with Vogtländer Z mount and go full manual. I don't mind manual focus, but would like to have both options. Let's hope Nikon hears our pleas. And Shapiro wrote, I use Fujifilm X and GFX cameras. I picked up a Nikon ZF with the 40mm lens last week, but returned that kit a couple of days ago. The lens issue was one of the primary reasons. If Nikon or a third party releases weather-resistant metal prime lenses with aperture rings autofocus in Z mount, I would consider the camera again. Nikon should go all in with the lenses. I think many users of non-retro Z0 bodies would also like the option to use aperture rings. For me personally, it was quite interesting to see these two perspectives, and I want to focus on the second perspective, because I think it's relatively clear that if you're already a Nikon user and are in that ecosystem, it kind of makes sense to have the ZF as an B or C camera if you just want to have something different, a different shooting experience, and this camera delivers that. And if you already have lenses for that, that's a win-win situation, right? But I want to add some thoughts regarding the second camp, which I called Fuji/new customer camp, because as I already mentioned, Nikon has already a great job to utilize their current customer base, their Nikon customers. But I personally still think that Nikon has passed a huge opportunity to acquire new customers and pull them into the Nikon ecosystem. with the help of the Nikon ZF. And I still think that having native lenses from Nikon with aperture rings and autofocus would pull specifically Fujifilmers into the Nikon camp. Because first of all, Fujifilm users are used to that, having the exposure triangle as physical dials. Just as an example, you have here my X-T1. You have on the one side your ISO dial, your shutter speed, and here your aperture. So it just makes a perfect literal triangle regarding the exposure. If you use Fujifilm, you just appreciate that. If you wanted to use it more modern, you still can just dial in all the dials on auto and just use the front and back dial for aperture and shutter speed, for example. And in contrast, the Nikon ZF, because we don't have native autofocus lenses to aperture rings, you are just left with the shutter speed dial and the ISO dial. And I understand why Fujifilm users are hesitant to jump ship, simply because being used to that triangle. The other reason why I think that Nikon missed the opportunity to pull in Fujifilm users into the Nikon ZF or the Nikon system is that during 2024, if you follow the Fujifilm community, a lot of Fujifilm users were kind of pissed off at Fujifilm, and a lot of users had the feeling that they wanted to look for an alternative. That has, I think, two main reasons. First of all, in February, Fujifilm has bigly announced the X100VI, and that camera was highly anticipated. If you are in the camera niche, you know that during COVID, the camera before the X100V or 5 was highly hyped because of social media and TikTok, especially because of TikTok. And that camera was not only sold out, that camera also caused Fujifilm second-hand prices to go up, because a lot of people were kind of on that hype train regarding retro design cameras. And Fujifilm was just not physically capable to fulfill that kind of demand. And the camera was back ordered for years. Entering the X100VI in February, where Fujifilm basically said during the announcement there won't be any shortage of that camera because they opened up the new factory. And then when they released the camera, everyone was trying to get their hands on that camera, and the results was that that camera also get back ordered. A lot of buyers had to wait several months, half a year, and I read comments on other videos that they canceled their pre-order because they just don't want to wait that long. A lot of people were looking for alternatives. The second issue, which basically was an own goal from Fujifilm, they basically shot themselves in the foot, was that for their modern cameras like the X-T5 and the latest XH2 cameras, etc., they messed up the autofocus via firmware update. That autofocus basically ruined the camera to be reliable regarding autofocus. You can say that Fujifilm already is not known for good autofocus, but that firmware update was just a nail in the coffin for the modern cameras like the X-T5, and that pissed off a lot of people in the Fujifilm community. That far that a lot of people were discussing, saying that they want to change camera brands, that Fujifilm is unreliable, and I saw several videos, people moving to Lumix or moving to Sony, and that's the point where I think that Nikon would have been able to pull in all these frustrated Fujifilm users into their ecosystem with the help of the Nikon ZF. If the lens lineup would have been there, at least 1 or 2 lenses with aperture rings, because then I think Fujifilm users would feel cozy. They would basically get a camera which Fujifilm will never build, aka a retro design camera with a full frame sensor and having all the dials similar to their XT lineup. I personally think would make a big boost in sales and acquire new customers, especially because Fujifilm took 8 months to fix that firmware update regarding the autofocus. If you're in the camera niche community or whatever, specifically for Fujifilm, you know that firmware update was released just a month ago or 2 months ago, and it only fixes the autofocus. It just resets the autofocus to be before that firmware update. It doesn't improve the autofocus. Although Fujifilm was able to fix it again, it took a long time, and Fujifilm doesn't deliver regarding their Kaizen philosophy anymore, because people were expecting not only to get the autofocus fixed but also get it improved like they did it in the past, like with the XT1 camera, which got improved with every firmware update back in the days. And as I said, the ZF would be a great entry point for that pissed off Fujifilm users if Nikon has a couple of lenses with that aperturing. Even now, after the holidays or during that holiday sales, the prices for the Nikon ZF is extremely attractive, you could say, because on the Nikon page, at least here in Europe or Germany, I see it for a little above 1,800 euros as a new body only deal. Or if you look at MPB at used ZFs, they run around 1,700 euros. If you compare that to the price of an X-T5 from Fujifilm, the latest XT camera, that's also the same price level. Regarding price, it's quite similar, I would say. I understand that if you're already a Nikon user, having all the other Nikon lenses, or using the ZF just as an additional camera to have a different experience, I totally get that. I do that with several of my cameras if I want a different experience. As I said, I think Nikon would be able to pull in much more users through the ZF. That would be quite interesting, at least for me. I would be very curious to see what Nikon would do with that kind of demand if they see in their numbers that sales increases regarding the Nikon ZF. For example, imagine Nikon would continue their retro lineup inspired by the rangefinder from Nikon themselves. But I think we have to see what will happen in 2025. If Nikon is willing to invest more money into the Nikon ZF retro lineup, you could say. Here also another comment from my video from Rios summarizes that quite well. Nikon is still a business, and there are several decisions which are only based on numbers, mostly sales. I am contemplating adding a Nikon DF and using it exclusively with manual focus lenses. I own the ZF too and fully agree with you. I wished Nikon would dedicate smaller lenses to go along with it. I mean, the AIS line was small, so they could do it again. Nikon, however, is an economic entity. There will dictate further investments, looking at numbers only, which makes sense but might be frustrating for customers. I doubt Nikon will choose to do so though. And yeah, I agree. I worked for big companies in the past and still working for another big company right now. Decisions within a big company are quite difficult to understand sometimes. And I also understand regarding the Nikon ZF that basically they have to check if the sales numbers are valid or pulls in enough revenue. On the other hand, I find it's quite interesting that Nikon has the courage to do these kind of retro design cameras. As I mentioned in my previous video, the Nikon Zf, the ZFC, and now the ZF. There's kind of courage to invest in such a camera without knowing how well it does, I guess, on Nikon's side. And I wish that Nikon would go a little bit further with the courage just to add some lenses to the lineup of retro design cameras. And if you're a camera person like me, you know that saying that you are dating your camera body, but you will marry the camera lenses. And for the Nikon ZF, it's currently just a sexy body, but the lenses are there, but they don't match the retro design language, unfortunately, right now. And in my personal opinion, without retro design lenses, it loses its touch. I know that we all have the options from third parties. Foclander, one of them, makes extremely great lenses for the Nikon Z mount. They are all manual focus lenses, and specifically the 40mm 1.2. I keep hearing a lot of great things about that, which seems to fit extremely well on the Nikon ZF. But despite all the third-party offerings, people do ask for native lenses, despite all the third-party offerings. It's somehow a nature of human purchase behavior that after buying a third-party lens, and if there's a native option available, at some point you will be gravitated to that lens from the native brand. Say that's from the Canon lineup of the L lenses, the Nikon lenses from the Silver lineup, or Sony with their G Master lineup, or last example, Leica native glass. But all of that, as I mentioned, just my personal opinion. And I just wanted to rant a bit about this topic because I find it quite fascinating regarding that aperture ring discussion, because that was of course a design language from the past, because it was necessary, like this Nikon FM2 having that aperture ring on the lens. And I find it kind of fascinating how we people from the future asking for old stuff, you could say, since we already have passed that and integrated different controls to take control over aperture and shutter speeds. But somehow we human still gravitate toward old stuff. But that's a topic for another video, because I have a lot of thoughts about vintage cameras and old cameras in general. I will save that for another video, probably in the new year. But since I'm losing my voice, looks like I'm not recovered from my cold yet. Been now over 2 or 3 weeks. I want to wrap this video up and just say thank you for your time watching this. If you're still here, thank you very much for your time until this point watching, and you are the one who deserves the like for that. If you want to support my small little channel, check the affiliate links below in the description, or buy me a coffee also below in the description. And if you want to see more videos on my channel, just click on one of these, and have a nice day.